I'm Alex. I'm 25, and I just became the CEO of a $100 million company. But that same brand was once valued at over $6 billion. So yeah, we've got a bunch of work ahead.
Like, fuck the market.
That clock keeps ticking like a metronome, and my thoughts keep telling me to get me home.
All right, guys, welcome back to Vibe Trading, the show where I get on various traders and builders in the space. Today we've got a special guest. We've got Alex, who is the CEO and new head chef over at SushiSwap, sushi.com, I guess, technically. Welcome to the show, and how you been? What's new, man? How's it going?
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, no, I'm doing well, busy, but excited to chat.
Yeah, so I guess this is, technically your kind of first podcast since taking over Sushi, which I feel like has kind of like flown under the radar a little bit. It's not something I've seen people speaking about too much. It's obviously a pretty big decision to come in and buy such a large amount of sushi and basically take over the company and try to steer it in the right direction. I'd love to hear, a bit more in your words, how that happened, why that happened, and just a bit of like an intro from you about what's going on now with Sushi.
Yeah, so I guess for some background, I've been in the space for several years now. I've been kind of around, right? I started a pretty large Web3 venture studio and then hedge fund and trading desk. And I was a big kind of ecosystem, like I was in the sushi ecosystem. So I was a token holder and I was a service provider. Basically, I was helping out the engineering team with stuff we had at our engineering firm, and just had my finger on the pulse of what was going on. And, I feel like sushi is this brand that is just, it's got something to it that's so special, right? I sort of have seen sushi always as the best DEX brand in crypto and one of the best DeFi brands in crypto. I think you have like Uniswap and Aerodrome and Hyperliquid that are these really great products and have a ton of users. But from a retail standpoint, I think the brands are a little bit intimidating. And when you think about sushi.com and kind of the retail appeal and what it has there, it's just like such a great asset, basically. And, there kind of came an opportunity to basically make an activist investment and come in and like run the show. And so, I was kind of trading my own money and running my own book and advising and stuff, and had a lot of success. I was kind of bored, frankly, a little bit, and trying to figure out I wanted to do something with enough scale that was interesting, and it's kind of in between like starting a hedge, basically like turning my fund into an actual like hedge fund, taking outside money, starting something new, and then kind of the sushi opportunity rolled around, and I was like, this is super interesting. You know what I mean? I think that, like I said, it's such a crazy asset. And so, kind of like the opportunity came up and I just jumped at it. And yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit before the show about kind of my thesis, right, of coming in at Sushi and why, like what I think is so valuable. And I think it kind of comes down to just this idea that if you think about DeFi protocols, right, you probably have in the crypto space like 50 or less DeFi protocols that actually have product market fit, users, a good product that people use consistently. Like Sushi has over 4 million users, right? And so there's actually a very scarce inventory of these DeFi assets that are really, really valuable and really widely used. And you have this proliferation of TradFi coming into the space, and you have everybody like trying to trade Perps now and tokenized stocks, tokenized commodity. And you have like all these TradFi institutions trying to basically leverage DeFi rails, right? With credit, with the lending markets, with stable coins. And so if you think about like, what are the assets that are going to be really valuable in facilitating that, it's like basically these really scarce assets that have the infrastructure, have the rails, right? The swaps, the exchanges, the stable coins, the lending and credit markets, the DEX aggregators, the wallets, the custodians. And so, my thesis was basically that this is just an incredible asset that in a lot of ways was just sort of overlooked, and that just, was kind of just kind of like missed the boat in a lot of ways, right? Like missed the boat on Solana trading season, like didn't launch on Solana, missed the boat on Perps, like didn't get Perps out to market when it could have been positioned really well to do so. And so, just sort of like missed the renaissance of like a few of these important things. And I was like, okay, well, I think that if we position well and kind of get a little bit of momentum, we could kind of position for that. And then kind of last, I think the last most important thing that is like pretty interesting is we talked a little bit before the show about Luca Nets from Pudgy, right? And I said that Luca is basically the best person I've ever, like the best person I would say in crypto in terms of like cultivating and spurring community and network effects, right? Like he understands community and network effects at the highest level. And if you look at Sushi, it's like it's a scarce asset where it has product market fit, it has revenue, it has like over 4 million users that use the swap. And then you go in the Discord and there's like one guy talking, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, so the one thing that crypto is so good at, which is community and network effects, is like the thing that is missing, basically, right? To hit a home run and win market share, right? On the trading front, like especially, right? Where you have a flywheel, basically, where if you have a bunch of people and users engaged, you generate revenue and you have a flywheel that you can kind of sustain. And so that was sort of the thesis, basically, and why decided to do it, and kind of how we're thinking a little bit about like bringing it back.
Yeah, I mean, like the Sushi IP is obviously huge, and I'm sure I think like a big component of like some of the things you were saying in terms of the fact that you have these rails, like everything's already built out, is also the fact that Sushi still has probably quite a lot of traffic, and I feel like as an opportunity for you coming in and taking over, the token's been there like flatline for so long, like and from I think my perspective and many is like the downside is actually very small, right? Like whoever was gonna sell Sushi's probably already sold it. Like it's kind of like just this vehicle that's like sitting there and like ready for someone to, if they have enough of it, to actually take over. Like I'd be interested to know like what did the takeover actually look like in terms of you acquiring the Sushi tokens that you did? Like was that done OTC? Was that done on market? And what does like the handover look like, right? Because you've got this, in theory, sort of decentralized product, but at the end of the day, there's a sushi.com domain, there's some of the like underlying infrastructure, maybe are there any elements of the team that were transferred over? Like what did the takeover actually look like from an implementation sort of standpoint?
Yeah, so I have to be like a little careful about what I say, just because like certain stuff's public, certain stuff's not. I'll say that a lot of the core team, we leaned out the team quite a bit. So we leaned out, we're down to probably I would say around 12 people on the core team, from like
not much bigger
plus.
than Hyperliquid.
Yeah, and so I mean, really with AI and kind of the like proliferation of these tools, I just think like lean, ambitious teams is the way to go, basically, unless you kind of need more scale for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, in essence, like the handoff. I mean, I'm still kind of like in a lot of the, I would say the handoff process to some degree, like getting onboard to chats and onboard to everything. But Sushi has a DAO kind of mechanic, and then a kind of private OpsCo mechanic, and there were votes back in like 2024 that like codified a lot of the kind of separation. But largely, Sushi was actually one of the pioneers, I would say, of kind of separating out like ops and roadmap functionality and team, and having kind of separate balance sheet and those types of things from DAO. And so, that's sort of where Sushi's at now. So in a lot of ways, the OpsCo kind of has a more like private company type of function. And then the DAO really has a lot to do with like tokenomics and protocol upgrades and kind of things of that nature.
And I guess also you sort of like touched on the fact that like prior to all of this, you were kind of in the more VC venture studio side. This is obviously a pretty big pivot if you think about like your role, right, going from like this kind of more like VC and then obviously running maybe your own book for a while to this like more Lucanet style like marketing almost play, right? How do you kind of feel like your skill set like aligns with running something like Sushi now, right? Like, because I feel like it seems like from the content I've seen you make, like the direction is leaning towards turning it into this DeFi like super app in some ways, right? Whereas I feel like the previous style of Sushi was this very like decentralized governance style approach. Where do you kind of lie between the previous like maybe decentralized side of it and the more I'd say current like modern approach of like turning making into something hopefully a bit bigger as well?
Yeah, I think the, you know, I would say that I guess like for some of my background in terms of like how I look at these things, my first business ever was a marketing company. So I started out in marketing, and then I moved into like engineering. I built an engineering firm, basically engineering services firm, and then like trading desk trader, right? And so I think Sushi's kind of uniquely this culmination of all my skill sets, right? Actually, in a lot of ways. But I would say that if you look at all of the products and companies that are forming now, right? I've said this a few times before, but I would say that crypto is the market is entering hard mode, right? Like if you're a startup in crypto or if you're trying to build anything, you can't really get away with being mediocre anymore. I would say DeFi summer, a lot of these every token just goes up forever. People launch, nonsense projects and it gets a bid and then, all of a sudden these projects that are horribly mismanaged, have massive treasuries or have massive revenue, like those opportunities don't really exist anymore because the market has matured to the point where just the execution of the existing teams, the execution of the teams that are around are like really well oiled. And so I think
it's gotten so sharp.
Yeah, it's gotten so fucking sharp, right? So you basically have to operate at the highest level to even have a chance. You know what I mean? And so I would say that, our outlook on it is basically, Sushi has these like decentralized decentralized roots, but ultimately, we have to mature as an organization and be thinking about like, how can we grow, right? And so I'm thinking a lot about, okay, well, we have Sushi almost has like 4 lines of business is like the way I look at it, which is, some people don't really know this. And this is something that they should know basically to share, right? It's like we essentially have 4 lines of business, right? We have really like the retail business, which is the front end, swaps, everything that basically just the front end, everything that happens through the swaps. We now have Perps live, right? Powered by Hyperliquid, and we're doing some really cool stuff there. The second is really the enterprise business. So we have a pretty large sort of enterprise business where we actually do DEX as a service or DeFi as a service for L1s, L2s, institutions. We help deploy DEX instances, and it's effectively like a large enterprise business, which is part of Sushi's business. I think as traditional finance kind of matures, that's going to be a massive business line for us, where we can actually help these financial institutions access DeFi rails from a trading perspective, right? Because there's so much demand for that. And like I said, there's just like a very scarce amount of teams and companies with
underrated,
brand.
For sure.
Right. And so there's probably an enterprise business that, can be a $50 or $100 million a year business alone at Sushi, very easily not very easily, but it's super attainable, I think, right? If you have the right partners and you're providing the right value. Then you have our DEX aggregator, right? And so our DEX aggregator is super widely distributed, over 25 billion in volume. We're integrated with a lot of the top wallets and venues. And so our DEX aggregator is actually arguably the most competitive in the entire industry. If you look at from a latency standpoint, we have the best latency of any DEX aggregator, right? There's no other DEX aggregator in the industry that's sub 100 milliseconds, sub 50 milliseconds latency. And so if you think about kind of these different lines of business, right? It's you have retail and facilitating the retail activity. You have enterprise, you have the DEX aggregator and the distribution of the swap API. And then you really have TVL and I would say TVL AUM monetization, right? So if you think about having TVL on the platform, having liquidity, right? You generate fees on having that liquidity. And if you have an aggregator, or pools get aggregated more broadly, but having an aggregator is a really valuable asset if you have liquidity domestically, essentially, right? Because to the extent that in the future, if you can find ways to optimally route aggregator volume through liquidity, where that's like feeding into the flywheel. You're essentially like, you have a vertical integration, right, for that entire workflow. And so, you know, each of these lines of business, like the retail could be a giant business, right? The retail is a big business on Swap. You know, as we grow out into perps and derivatives and other things that we do, maybe, you know, maybe super app, maybe brokerage one day, right? Like maybe we even do like a Sushi TradFi, Robinhood style brokerage app, right? And we have like that kind of a product live. And then, you know, you have the aggregator, you kind of maintain that and keep up that competitiveness and the distribution there. And then you have TVL and kind of it's almost like an AUM style monetization, right? Where the more TVL you grow, the more the more you're effectively monetizing over time. And there's ways to kind of like branch into like credit, like lending markets, and there's ways to expand that out. Even like you could spin up a fund, right? And you could actually like that fund could actually be a prop desk that's trading your perps and running basis trades in your books, right? And like maybe like SexDex arb, right, between the pools, which is like making the prices more efficient, which helps feed into the aggregator business. And so there's like this really dynamic ecosystem that there's a lot of work left to be done, but like it can really like flow really well, right, once it matures. And so, you know, that's a lot of like how we're thinking about kind of like looking at it through a more mature lens of like, what does this look like in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and how do you build this like almost like this DeFi, like almost like a monopolistic type, kind of like value capture on the value chain within DeFi, right?
Yeah, it's like the forgotten beauty of DeFi, you know.
Well, DeFi, like crypto is moving towards monopoly, like 100%. You know what I mean? If you think about like who are the biggest players in the space, right? The Binances, the Coinbases, the USDCs, the USDTs, like they are so good at making investments in like core infrastructure, right? That has like, they
and
all
aligning
have
with what they want.
right, and aligning with what they want, right? And they see it early because they're sharp. And so they see, okay, perp dexes are a thing, like, Binance launches Aster, right? And then Coinbase goes and says, okay, well, we're going to, Coinbase Circle say, okay, we're going to go do the land grab with USDC over here with Hyperliquid, right? And so these guys see
for sure.
the plays, basically, right? Super early.
Three moves
ahead,
yeah. It's great. Yeah,
yeah. So that's the direction it's going. It's vertical integration and like ownership of as much of the value chain as you can get your hands on, essentially.
And I guess like bouncing on from Hyperliquid, you guys obviously, I'd say on the public like side of like what you're mainly focused on and talking about right now is obviously the recent Perps integration. And so I'd be interested to know, what are your kind of plans on any kind of unique integration there, or like future for the Perp side of things, or is it more of a marketing builder code type play? Because obviously there are a lot of front ends that are using Hyperliquid builder codes right now. So how do you kind of want to try stand out on that front slightly, or is it I'm sure it's also just like partially a play on the fact that Sushi has a bunch of users, and so having Perps is always going to be a way to get some extra revenue, similar to Phantom or anyone else who integrates them.
Yeah, so for me Perps was really about, I don't want users at Sushi to leave Sushi to trade Perps elsewhere, right? That was kind of the fundamental like starting place. Is I just don't want, we have about 4 million users on the front end. We don't want them going somewhere else to trade Perps. Now, I think you're exactly what you're saying basically is like the question that I've been asking is what is our hook, right? Because I think wallets can kind of get away with just having Perps because their main business isn't trading. Their main business is being a wallet, and then they kind of offer it, and like you said, it's just sort of an easy monetization stream. But Sushi, our focus is over time going to be, kind of evolving into more of an all-purpose trading venue. And so we're definitely thinking about it. Right now, we're running a points season, and we're going to be doing Sushi token incentives for traders, essentially, and that's kind of what we're doing to initially bootstrap that activity, and so that's live right now. But we're thinking a lot about, how could we essentially like pivot to really, pivot or just add some value on top of what we currently have from the Perp stack to kind of have a really good hook for our users, basically, and a reason for them to use Sushi over another venue. I think the UI is super good. We put a lot of work into that. but yeah, I mean, right, it was kind of a go-to-market speed decision, I would say, initially for us.
Yeah, and I think definitely like a good thing to add, and then yeah, I'm sure you guys will figure out like some unique ways to kind of like package it, offer it, like build on top of it. You know, that being like the beauty of what Hyperliquid lets you do. I guess also, you know, if you're doing these points and stuff, but you know, Sushi is obviously already kind of like fully circulating token. You know, what does that look like, right? Like, does it come in the form of like fees? Does it come in the form of other tokens from the treasury? Like, you know, what does the kind of like general sort of like rewards look like there? And I guess also just like general, like your sort of, if you have them already, like future plans for, I guess, any changes around like Sushi tokenomics and like maybe some like Hyperliquid aligned type, like, you know, revenue buyback burn kind of stuff. You know, what are your plans there?
Yeah, we've got we've got some ideas we're cooking up right now. I think currently the incentives for trading are going to be like strictly around volume, and so you know we haven't like published the exact kind of exact amount or what, but you know we have an idea in our head of what we want to do there. We're definitely thinking about these types of things and the way Hyperliquid is doing things from a buyback mechanic standpoint. We're definitely looking into what we can do from kind of a legal perspective as well, just like making sure we take our time and kind of do what makes sense. But we're definitely thinking about ways that the token can kind of be integrated into the ecosystem deeper. And we think that that's like a very important mechanic, I would say, for the ecosystem to grow and for that flywheel to activate. So it's top of mind right now. I can't say too much
Yeah, I
more,
guess
but
I know it's early, but
it's
I
top
thought
of
I'd
mind,
ask
you
anyway.
know? Yeah, but it's top of mind for sure, and we're working at it.
Because it used to be X Sushi, right? And then there was some
So
revenue kickback to that or something.
so we still have X Sushi actually, and X Sushi is primarily based on like really like V2 liquidity, largely protocol fees. And so V2 protocol fees basically from V2 go to buying back X Sushi and distributing it to the sushi bar. That's how sushi has worked for years. And the thing is, right, in how we evolve that system is really thinking about, well, V2 liquidity is obviously antiquated, and Sushi now is an aggregator. And really the meta of like DEX trading is not having the most liquidity on your AMM, it's really having the right aggregator stack and being able to just trade at the best price, right? And so I think it made a ton of sense when the meta was like, you need the max amount of TVL on the platform because that's going to get you the best price, and whoever has the most TVL wins. But in 2026, I guess the year we're in,
Double
right?
check, double check.
Dude, that's like it's the weirdest thing to say. But like in 2026, you know, you need a better an approach probably that's more, I would say, aligned with like what the ecosystem wants to do long term from here, right? And kind of like what the infrastructure sort of is like allowing for and focusing on. So.
Yeah, and I'd say like,
But it still exists, but it, you know, it just needs, you know, we're thinking a lot about like how can we improve it basically.
yeah, for sure. And I guess you know, are you thinking about like the raising side at all? Like, you know, is there's the very like Hyperliquid aligned like no VC kind of thing, like, you know, the tokens are out there, like you can buy them yourself, you can become a market maker, whatever, or like, but do you think about like, you know, raising in some ways for Sushi and trying to like grow that pie in some way, or are you still leaning towards like a fully like on-chain token, everyone buy their own tokens kind of model?
Yeah, I mean we have no market makers, so Sushi has no market makers, and I'm pretty like I ran a trading desk, right, and I know the game basically that a market maker plays, and fundamentally a lot of the games that market makers play are extractive. And so if you're going to allow a market maker to extract value from the market cap of your token, you better have a very good reason, right? And so to me, like, I don't really see that reason today. We have no market makers for the token. We don't have any plans to have market makers for the token in the future. I would say, in terms of raising capital for like the OpsCo and kind of like building out that side of things, it's something that we've considered, conversations we've had. I've never raised VC capital for any of my businesses. I've bootstrapped everything. I built like multiple 8-figure businesses in the past, software business. When I first launched my trading desk, I scaled it to like over $10,000 a day of P&L, bootstrapped like within 60 days. You know what I mean? So I built these I fundamentally look at business from a first principle standpoint of a business should be able to make money and sustain itself, and should not have to be loss leading to win market share. And so,
I agree.
That's the basis that I operate off of, and I operate off the basis of how do we win as much market share as possible, how do we generate as much revenue as possible, and then how do we operate as lean as possible and as sharp as possible with like the new people that we bring in. So if the right VCs and the right strategics come along and the terms are phenomenal and it's going to help us get to the next level, I'm never going to say no. I'm never going to just be like, I'm not an ideologue. You know what I mean? I think like a lot of crypto runs on ideology. It's like, oh, crypto should be this way, or you should do things this way. It's like, that's not really practical, right? It's just like being open-minded is what matters the most, and just being, making good decisions, right? It's like, make good deals, make deals that are beneficial to like the vision that you're trying to achieve. And, if it makes sense, then go for it, right? And like take calculated risk.
100%. I think another interesting thing is the fact that the reason why the Sushi story is so interesting is because for people who are listening who aren't educated on it, and I'm going to try and make a cool little intro that portrays this before this episode, right? So that people who aren't, the new Solana heads who maybe aren't aware can get educated, right? But it's like Sushi was basically like one of the first OG like big like Vamps, basically, right? Where they offered Uniswap LPs the ability to put their LPs stake them almost within Sushi, and then over the span of a few weeks they were able, and in return for Sushi tokens, and then over a span of a few weeks migrated a bunch of those Uniswap LPs, like an incredibly large percentage over to SushiSwap, and were able to basically bootstrap like a fuck ton of TVL and usage, and it drove the token up from like pennies to dollars, basically, right? I'm sure obviously if you did have plans for it, it's not the kind of thing you're going to disclose here, but how do you kind of think about, do you think it's possible for Sushi to maybe do like another Vamp in some way? I don't know. Maybe it's speculative for me, but I think it'd be pretty cool to see.
I think it's possible. I think the Perpdex Vamp could be very interesting. So I think the Perpdex Vamp could be very interesting. Get all the perp traders over to Sushi. And I would say that we've like played around with these kinds of ideas. I would say, like I said, it's like the market's entered hard mode, and so you need to like get really creative and be sharp and get momentum to be able to execute on this stuff. I also think the market's kind of, you can't run like the bull run playbook in the bear market, right? Which is kind of like the other thing too, is you kind of have to maneuver a little bit more when volume isn't crazy and activity isn't crazy, and there aren't just massive influx of new retail. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely an opportunity to, I mean, what was the vampire attack basically, right? It's basically throw incentives at people and get everybody aligned in a community vision to like make this thing successful, right? That's pretty much what it was. And if you think about it, Hyperliquid is a vampire attack. It's vampire attacking all the centralized exchanges, and it's saying, come over to Hyperliquid, trade here, we're going to take all the fees, and we're going to buy back the token, right? Hyperliquid is a vampire attack. It's the same idea. Just better fundamentals in a lot of ways, in terms of like not just spraying supply out to be dumped, but actually like taking fees and then just buying back supply and kind of holding it, right? And so that was the mechanic that they used. And so, I mean, I think for Sushi, the roadmap is definitely includes like, how do we rebuild the community story, the community narrative? How do we get people bought into the vision? How do we get people coming and using the new products, using the Perps platform that we've launched, using that, taking a look at basically the entire ecosystem that we're developing and taking a bet long term on what we're building and using our products. And like we need, the thing that Hyperliquid's done so well is like they basically have an army of evangelists, right? And any good crypto project has an army of evangelists that just create these network effects. And so it's a little bit of what Sushi is probably missing right now, right? And it's part of what we're trying to do. Like we launched the YouTube channel, basically, the building in public videos. I think our 4th video got 150,000 views on YouTube. Like every single video we're posting on YouTube is pulling over 15,000 views. And I post a tweet on X and I get like 20 likes. You know what I mean? Like it just hasn't hit crypto Twitter yet. That's the thing, is like crypto Twitter and YouTube and Instagram, like these you would think they're interconnected, but these platforms are actually like very different audiences. And so, you know, we'll see. We got to build up that same momentum on X a little bit, but
yeah, no, it's funny you say that, because that was literally going to be my next question, was like about the content side, which obviously you've been going pretty hard on, and you know I think that's like probably the reason why like people are starting to pay attention again. And you know, even if I think like, especially as like crypto natives, you may look at that content and feel like it seems maybe like, you know, somewhat like detached from like the true like crypto building, like traditional crypto building nature. I think like it is probably like a good step in the right direction in terms of, you know, what do people actually pay attention to these days, and inspiring like the right kind of crowd like outside of CT that is actually most of the time going to be the one that then redirects, that like encourages the crypto people to like trade based on that outlook, right? Like us as crypto people, we're always buying something in anticipation or like response to what we perceive like retail to be doing. And so like if retail is seeing these videos and like that's getting traction and people are buying into like the vision of like, you know, maybe it's partially you, maybe it's partially the rest of the team, whatever, then actually the effect of that is going to also be reflected on the crypto side as well.
yeah, it's I mean, each platform has its use, right? And so I can't, you know, if you want to go on YouTube and you want to talk about DeFi yield farming, and you want to talk about running a basis trade, or you want to talk about a DEX aggregator and how routing works and how, you know what I mean, and perps and, you know, oh, commodity perps, and these are, you know, oh, the tokenization of this and that. Like, if you want to be a news channel and if you want to do talking head videos, that's fine. I don't really have the bandwidth for that, and I also don't think that's that's not the storytelling, kind of compelling storytelling that Sushi needs, right? I think coming on here, like we can talk about all of those things and we have an appreciation for them and we can nerd out on them and be like, oh, what do you think about this? Or, oh, did you see, you know, this oil trade, right? And the way that like they were arbing these perp futures on Hyperliquid with the options rolls that were happening a few months ago, right? And we can talk about these mechanics and why they're so interesting. And like that's the platform for that, and that's the venue for that. But if we're talking about top of funnel, like YouTube is top of funnel for us. Right? I want the YouTube videos. I want to pull 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 views a video, and I want people to be like, I don't even know what crypto is, but I think this is cool, right?
Yeah, that's funny.
And then I want to launch the Sushi mobile app, and I want to fucking rinse everybody in crypto and be like, listen, look what we did. You know what I mean? Everybody in DeFi is gonna be like, huh? How'd they get all these users? How'd they get all this revenue? It's like, yeah, well, we have 250,000 people per video watching the video, and we're gonna go download, you know, the Sushi mobile app. And we're going to make it abstracted, and we're going to make it the easiest thing to use in the entire market, right? And so top of funnel, YouTube, it's a great distribution mechanism. If we're talking about the protocol, we're talking about the fundamentals, we're talking about the business, we're talking about like the nitty gritty, I think X is the best place for that, right? And you know, I wrote like a 3,000 word article on my DeFi alt super cycle thesis the other day, right? But like, you know what I mean? So I write those things and I put that type of content out. But like what Sushi needs is and what any DEX trading venue needs, it's actually like three things that make a trading venue successful. It's money and incentives, it's a really good product, differentiated product, and it's community and network effects. Those are literally the three things that you need for a successful trading venue. And Sushi has all three, but it could use some juice in basically all three areas. And so from a community and network effects standpoint, I actually think that's the most powerful one out of all three of them. And so, and it's the one that we were actually lacking the most when I joined. And so my focus is like, how do we build that community and network effects and get that community buy-in and get people using our products again? And so, you know, the YouTube, we also just have a crack team. So we're just going to do it better than anybody else. And then we're going to, you know, go and win a bunch of eyeballs, right? And so it's just a distribution mechanism that at the end of the day, right? It's like, at the end of the day, it's actually really hard to film these videos because I'm at my desk or on phone calls and doing things we actually can't share like 99% of the time. So a little bit is like, we're almost like going out of our way to try to film stuff to also keep it entertaining, which is a little bit like, but we don't want to be doing that, you know what I mean? Because we want it to just kind of be this raw thing. And so, but yeah, anyway, like that's kind of the thesis with it.
No, I completely agree. Like I try to make, that's why I do this kind of content, because like this is the kind of content that for me is yes, it's niche and it's for the people who are willing to sit and listen to DeFi intricacies and like founder stories and things like that. But it's also, you know, the reality of actually like being in this industry and like sitting at a desk most of the day means that making content is very hard, and like you need to really like have a team to be able to do that effectively, because otherwise you're just like not going to have the mental mind space to run a company and do that content at the same time, at least in a good way. But like I was just looking just to compare, and it's like you're actually getting way more views on your videos than even like Luca Netz's page, just saying. And you're also making more videos than he is, which is like once a year. I mean, that's, I'm sure if he actually put his mind to it, he would do well there as well. But I think it's definitely good to see, and especially also in a market / cycle where I would say that views on YouTube for crypto related things are arguably like the lowest they've like ever been in the grand scheme of things. And also I would say that engagement on Twitter is probably, for crypto again, is probably like harder than it's ever been in terms of like the algo not massively favoring it, and the kind of like general reach and awareness being slightly capped in the crypto space. I'm sure like we've seen it a lot on the timeline, and like even I've experienced it myself, where it's like seems like there's a lot of like cleansing of bots and things like that, and just like generally hard to sometimes push out unless you do something that really stands out. So, you know, I hope you guys can do some cool stuff on the retail side, unique side, to get that attention, and like I'm sure you will.
Yeah, it's X is like a different beast now, huh? It's just it's crazy. I feel like, yeah, the reach is so suppressed. It's like I've noticed that when you tweet things about things that are trending, like they get pickup. If you just say anything about anything that's trending, that's pretty much the way that you get attention in the algo. But you have to almost like trend jack, you know, which is
huge tip I found recently is I guess for anyone listening, is that I was hard stuck at like 11.7k followers or something like that, and now I'm at like 12.3 in a span of like a few weeks. And what I did is I started reposting already big tweets, like big viral tweets. Like, let's say someone does a tweet about something relevant that has 300,000 views. If you quote tweet it and add a relevant take, and or you also attach some of your own media to it, can be a picture, can be a video, the algo like really heavily weights that, because it assumes that basically the underlying post that you quote tweeted is already viral, and therefore people want to see it again and see more takes on it, and it's relevant in some way. So if you quote tweet it with your own, you know, valuable take, as long as you don't just like copy and paste it in some way, algo seems to like that a lot. So I completely agree that like trend jacking is very much the way it is, and like we see these very like quick, short rotations, narratives in the space, whether it be from Solana to Base to something else at the moment as well.
Yeah, I mean, X is like, crypto is cyclical and attention is cyclical around it, right? So, I mean, the AI narrative is like, it's hard to get attention on anything other than like AI right now. You know, everything is AI basically.
Any AI integrations into Sushi?
Our API actually is like agent enabled now, so agents can trade.
That's cool.
On Sushi. Yeah, and we're gonna.
That's actually really cool.
Maybe
that's really cool.
Yeah,
You should.
But we're gonna do some more agentic stuff, I think. Maybe an agentic trading competition would be cool. I thought that would be like really cool. Like let people make agents and then like compete them, right? And even like vaults, like agent vaults. So like you can basically, if you make a really good agent, someone else can use it, like a vault kind of structure where they trade for you. And
do you have any plans yet about the social side as well? Because obviously we've seen quite a lot of the Hyperliquid front ends adding like some social features. Like for example, Kinetic has a pretty cool markets mobile app, which has, I'd say it's kind of like the FOMO, if you know what FOMO is, equivalent of Perps on Hyperliquid with their stuff. And then as well, like, you know, on Solana side and on other like on-chain trading side, obviously things like FOMO are doing very well, right? And I think that like the apps that are able to build these social layers are able to retain users much better. And so I think like it's becoming a pretty key or like fundamental component of growing as well, like nowadays in the crypto space.
Yeah, I would say that for Sushi, like we have this tightrope that we have to walk in this balance, right? Because our core swap UI is the same that it was in like 2021, 2022, but we just still have so many people that use it. And so to me, it's kind of, I don't want to muddy that basically and change that and deter users that just really like this simple swap UI experience that they feel really comfortable with. So I think that our, you know, like our outlook on it is basically how can we build new features, build things that keep people engaged, get those power users over to Sushi, trading, doing lots of volume, and really falling in love with the product without also like killing the experience for the novice trader, right? Or the novice user that just like wants to do a swap or like wants to buy a meme coin. And it's just like, okay, I know how to post the contract address in, and I know I can connect my MetaMask wallet, and I know that I just go here and then I just swap, right? So we don't want to, you know, we also, it's like very, I would say the biggest counterweight is that I'm very innovation forward and want to do all these new things and try all these new things, but also just we want to be mindful not to deter our existing user base and not overcomplicate it, basically. So I think that's where when we come into like the mobile app, which we have in design right now and we're working on, and you know, some of these like kind of prosumer type trading features around perps and trying to build that kind of walled garden for more advanced users. Like, what are the things that we can offer them? I think that's the stuff we want to play with a lot more and figure out what's really interesting. Because, I mean, for me, I think I'm like a top 500 hyperliquid trader. So I've been trading perps for years, and I've been in the trenches. I actually issued a challenge. I said anyone that's a hyperliquid trader. I was like anywhere from 10 to, I'll do up to like $1 million, like $1 million versus $1 million, and I'll do it. You know, we'll put up like 25K or whatever you want to put up, whatever. 1 month trading competition. Whoever has the best P&L wins. You know, by the end of it. But you got to trade on Sushi. That's the rule. You know, we trade on Sushi. But you know, I'm inviting any. No one replied, dude. I can't get any action.
Yeah, I'll let me see what I can do. I think I can probably find you some interesting guys. And I guess
give me some action, dude. I'm here for it.
I'll see what I can do. And I guess also, touching on that, you know, where does this confidence come from your trading, or like how would you describe your trading style a little bit, your kind of philosophy around trading?
I would say that I'm actually like quite conservative, and I would say I look for like a few spots, a few times a quarter, a few times a year that I feel like are very dislocated, let's say. So I'm big on pair trades. I will run like large-sized pair trades where I feel like value is really dislocated between two assets. So I feel like one asset is very expensive and one asset is very cheap. I'll just put on huge size of a pair trade. And if the trade goes the wrong way on me, I size up. So I get very kind of convicted around these around certain ideas that I have, and you know I'm very like patient, I would say, around trading. Like I don't take a lot of trades, and I think I make the best trades when I'm just like, okay, the opportunity seems so blatant that I actually have to like go and do it because it's getting out of control. So a little bit of that. I look for a lot of arbitrage type stuff, a lot of funding rate arb stuff. I could give some alpha a little bit. That's like kind of interesting. And this is probably gonna like go eat up all of my edge on this trade, which I currently have it on. But whatever, I'll throw it out. Is that Anthropic currently is at like 1350 or whatever on like on Sushi right now. It's like Sushi, right? But the XYZ markets. For Anthropic, Perps are trading like 1350, and the funding rate for Anthropic is kind of oscillates anywhere from 50% annualized to like 1,000% annualized. And sometimes it's gone even, it went as high as 10,000% annualized the other day. So you're getting 1% hourly for shorting Anthropic. And the scary thing is like, you don't want to short Anthropic because it's like, might be one of the best companies ever to exist, and they can go double, triple in your face, right? And rip your face off and you get crushed. But there are certain public companies. One, for example, is like Zoom. People don't know this, but about half of Zoom's enterprise value is based on an Anthropic seed investment that they made at a $5 billion valuation. It's like estimated that they invested about $51 million, right? And so it's kind of this like, if you know with the Zoom thing that they actually made the seed investment in Anthropic, and it's like not fully reported how much they own, but it's like, it's estimated to be like quite a lot, right? And so you have this public market equity that you can own that, and there are other assets like this that exist where if you can actually get like a synthetic exposure to Anthropic in the public markets is like a spot, and then you can go and collect funding at 100, 200, 300, 400% annualized to be the only guy who's short Perps in crypto, be the only guy who's willing to take the short side of the trade. Well, all of a sudden you're making like, 30 bips to like 2% a day in funding on a carry trade, right? And then you just keep that on for like however long the that funding is super juiced. And so there's opportunities like that I'll do where like it's just like very obvious, but like
sure.
not very obvious, but like you know what I mean. It's sort of like very obviously there's some edge there, but it's kind of like a little bit tricky, like hard to find. So I do a lot of stuff like that. I don't really like, I don't trade majors. I don't just like long Bitcoin with leverage. I don't do anything like that.
Yeah, I think carry stuff is always interesting. There's a guy called Scott I'm gonna get on soon who does like some pretty interesting, like what is described as like dirty carry trades, where you're kind of like, you have a basket of like different funding trades that you're making basically, and I would argue it's like kind of similar to the pair trading stuff where it's actually probably easier for the average person, I think, to judge like relative correlation and strength between, say, for example, Bitcoin and Hyperliquid at the moment. I'd say is like a good example, as opposed to trying to predict like where the market is going to go next. Like for example, right now, I don't know how you feel about it, but like Hyperliquid is obviously like pumping a lot, like incredibly extended, while Bitcoin is like arguably kind of like dumping, and so there's probably going to be like some reversion to the mean where like Bitcoin comes up a bit or Hyperliquid comes down a bit in some ways, for example.
Yeah, and I think the funding matters a lot too. Like, are you going to go and pay like 50% annualized to be long Hyperliquid or any token for that matter, right? It's like probably not a very good idea, I mean, but it's like, that's just retail, like not really understanding the mechanics of what they're using, right? And so when there's that, like I said, there's that dislocation of, that like either the interesting thing about Perps is like Perps are not just a cool crypto product. Perps are like a financial innovation, right? It's like it's a better derivative than options, because it's the best way to just take a linear directional bet on price, right? And you don't have an option premium mechanic, you don't have a time mechanic, you don't have a time decay mechanic, right? You just get to decide, okay, I'm betting on the price. And the other thing that's really cool about Perps is the fact that you have the funding mechanic, right? And so at a certain funding rate, you're actually willing to take the opposite bet on the asset than what maybe your initial thesis is, right? Like maybe you say, okay, well, I really like this asset as a long, but if I get paid 1,000% a year, I like it as a short, right? And so you have this funding mechanic that like plays into the game theory, which makes it just such an interesting like derivative and instrument fundamentally. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think
that's the yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. If you have
No,
anything to say.
go.
I was just gonna say I don't want to keep you too late, or like drag this on too much. But if you have any other closing like thoughts you want to like any specific things you want to point people towards, any closing things you want to say about Perps or anything like that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say our Sushi Perps points are live right now. we're welcoming all the traders. I'm welcoming all the trading challenges too. So if anyone wants a 1v1 with me, let me know. Slide into the Sushi Telegram, and you know, we'll make it happen. But yeah, man, that's all I got. You know, I
Hell yeah,
appreciate you
awesome.
having me though. This is great.
Yeah, this was dope. Thank you so much for coming on, Alex, and you know, hopefully good things coming for Sushi.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah,
Awesome.
we'll keep chatting.